All right, so get this. We're talking cutting-edge tech meets old-school nuclear power.
A combo you don't hear every day, right?
Seriously. Imagine, like, your phone running on a nuclear reactor.
Well, maybe not your phone directly, but
Close enough.
yeah, it's wild. We're diving deep into how companies like, the big ones, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, are actually driving a nuclear comeback.
All to power those massive data centers everyone's talking about.
Exactly.
So by the end of this deep dive, we should all get why they're turning to nuclear,
I
right?
got it.
Even with all, like, the Chernobyl stuff.
We'll get to all that, the good, the bad, the whole 9 yards.
And then there's these small modular reactors,
Yeah,
SMRs.
cool new kids on the block.
Are those the key?
They might just be.
And I even heard something about underwater loudspeakers at nuclear plants.
Oh, yeah, that's a real thing.
Wait, what?
We'll get to that later, but trust me, it's a wild story.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
So where do we even start with all this?
Well, we got to start with understanding just how much power our digital lives actually consume.
Right, like all our streaming and online stuff.
Way more than you'd think. These data centers, they're the invisible engines behind everything we do online.
And they gobble up energy, don't they?
Big time. We're talking enough to power, like, a small city. And it's only going up as AI and cloud computing get, well, more and more powerful.
Okay, so data centers, they're basically energy hogs.
Pretty much.
But
Hey.
why not just use renewable energy? I mean, solar, wind, that's the future, isn't it?
They're definitely part of the solution, don't get me wrong, but they're not always there when you need them.
Ah, right, like the sun sets.
Exactly. The wind dies down, and suddenly you have what we call an energy gap.
So what, like blackouts and stuff?
Well, hopefully not.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, data centers need constant power, 24/7, what we call base load power. Think of it like the heartbeat of the whole system.
And nuclear can do that, provide that constant heartbeat. Okay, so nuclear power is reliable, got it. But let's face it, nuclear kind of has, like, a baggage problem, right?
Yeah, no way around it. Chernobyl, Fukushima, those were devastating events. Understandably, they made people scared of nuclear power.
And for good reason, right?
For sure. But the world's in a bit of a bind right now. Climate change, carbon emissions, we need to find solutions, and fast.
So you're saying nuclear might actually be part of the solution, despite everything?
It's definitely back on the table, yeah. It's low carbon, can provide that base load power we talked about, no greenhouse gases.
But isn't nuclear energy super expensive? Like crazy expensive to build those plants, right?
That is a challenge, no doubt. But that's where things get interesting. We're seeing the rise of what are called small modular reactors.
SMRs, those were mentioned earlier.
Yep, they're designed to be, well, smaller, obviously, but also more flexible and potentially much cheaper than those big traditional plants.
So we're talking mini nuclear reactors that you can, like, plop down next to a data center.
You're getting the picture. They're like modular building blocks for clean energy. You start small, add more units as needed. Perfect for data centers that are always growing.
So it's like building with Legos, but for clean energy.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And their smaller size means they can be made off-site, shipped to where they're needed, could really speed things up and make them cheaper too.
So instead of one huge, complicated power plant, you have a bunch of these smaller, more manageable ones.
Exactly.
And that's got to be appealing to those tech companies, right?
Absolutely. They love anything that's scalable and efficient. Plus, there's reason to believe SMRs could be safer than traditional reactors too.
Safer.
Yet new design features, passive safety systems, the whole shebang, trying to prevent those scary meltdowns that have happened in the past.
So we've got these power-hungry data centers on one hand, these potentially cheaper, safer SMRs on the other. Sounds like a match made in tech heaven.
You could say that.
But what about the tech companies themselves? Are they actually serious about going green? I mean, we all know they love making big promises.
Well, they have all made big commitments, that's true. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they've all pledged to become carbon neutral or even carbon negative in the coming decades.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
They are investing in renewables, big time. But it's just not enough to meet all their energy needs. Those needs are just skyrocketing.
Right, it's not enough to just say, hey, we're powered by renewable energy and call it a day.
Exactly. They need something more, something reliable.
And that's where nuclear comes in.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's a way for them to hit those ambitious targets while keeping everything running. A low-carbon solution that works alongside renewables.
So it's like a two-pronged attack on the energy problem.
You could say that. Think of it like building a foundation, a really solid foundation for a clean energy future.
Okay, so nuclear is the foundation. Renewables are like, what, the decorations on top?
I guess you could put it that way.
All right, so far so good. But hold on, there's got to be some downsides to this whole nuclear thing.
Oh, for sure. We can't just ignore the risks, you know?
Like what?
Waste disposal, the potential for accidents, those are big concerns.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole issue of, nuclear weapons.
Right. Those are definitely things to think about. So, are we being too optimistic about nuclear?
Well, it's complicated. There's no easy answer. We need to acknowledge the risks, address them head on. Public trust is key, right?
Mm-hmm.
The industry needs to prove they've learned from the past, that they're committed to safety.
So, a lot of potential, but also a lot of work to do.
Right.
But you know what? I am kind of optimistic.
Yeah?
Yeah. If any industry can make nuclear cool again, it's got to be the tech industry. They've got the brains, the money, and they know how to make things trendy.
I hear you. It'll be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Okay, so before we get too carried away, let's take a step back and talk about the science. Like, what's the difference between fission and fusion? I always get those mixed up.
Right, good point. Fission is what we use today in reactors, basically splitting atoms to release energy.
Okay, that's the one we know.
Fusion, on the other hand, that's the holy grail of clean energy. It's how the sun works, smashing atoms together to release energy.
Fusion sounds way cooler.
It does, doesn't it? But it's also way harder.
Yeah, I always hear that fusion is like 20 years away, and it's always 20 years away.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's incredibly complex and expensive to try to recreate those conditions here on Earth. We're talking about the temperatures and pressures found at the sun's core, like trying to bottle a star,
Oh, that's a good way to put it. So fusion is still a sci-fi dream for now.
For now, yeah. But things are changing fast. Big names in tech, folks like Bill Gates and the ChatGPT guy, Sam Altman, they're pouring money into fusion research.
So they see something in it.
They're betting on the long game, seeing fusion as the ultimate solution to our energy problems.
Yeah.
And you know what? There have been some big breakthroughs recently.
Like what?
Last year, for the first time ever, scientists actually got more energy out of a fusion reaction than they put in. That's huge.
Wow, so maybe fusion isn't so far-fetched after all. But let's bring it back to reality for a minute and talk about the here and now. What are the real environmental and economic impacts of nuclear power as it stands today?
Okay, good point. Environmentally, nuclear is a winner when it comes to emissions. Zero greenhouse gases, which is what we need to fight climate change.
So it's good for the planet. But what about like land use? I always hear those wind and solar farms take up a ton of space.
That's actually another advantage of nuclear. Nuclear plants have a surprisingly small footprint compared to other energy sources. You can generate a ton of power in a relatively small space.
So it's efficient.
Very.
Yeah.
And especially important in places where land is scarce.
Okay, so environmentally, nuclear seems to have a good track record. But we talked about the cost of building those plants. What other economic factors are we missing?
You're right. Cost is still a major barrier. Building and running these plants, it's expensive. And there are often delays and budget overruns.
Like that Hinkley Point C project in the UK?
It's exactly. Billions over budget and years behind schedule. It makes investors nervous.
And what about the waste?
Right. Nuclear waste. It's radioactive, obviously. And it needs to be stored safely for a very long time. We have ways to do it, but it's a challenge, and it makes people anxious, understandably so.
Yeah, not a simple problem to solve.
Nope. And then there's the issue of those SMRs we talked about. They're supposed to be the answer to some of these problems, but they've been slow to, actually get built and used.
So it's not all sunshine and roses with nuclear. There are definitely trade-offs.
Definitely.
But it does seem like there's a lot of potential there, especially with these tech companies backing it.
Yeah, they could really shake things up. But it's not a guaranteed win. There are hurdles to overcome. Cost, waste, public perception, the slow development of SMRs. It all plays a role.
So it's complicated, but that's what makes it so interesting to talk about.
I agree.
And you know what? Speaking of interesting, you mentioned underwater loudspeakers at nuclear plants.
Oh, yeah, remember that Hinkley Point C project we were talking about?
The one that's way over budget.
That's the one. Well, one of the reasons it's so expensive is all the environmental regulations they have to follow.
What does that have to do with loudspeakers?
Well, one of those regulations is underwater loudspeakers.
Wait, seriously?
Yep. To deter fish from getting too close to the plant's water intake pipes.
So they're blasting music underwater for the fish.
Not music, more like sounds, I guess. It's supposed to protect marine life, but it just goes to show how complex these nuclear projects can be.
Underwater loudspeakers.
Indeed.
That's wild.
It's just one of those little details that make this whole topic so fascinating,
Our listeners' brains are probably fried with all this nuclear info by now.
Hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, I think so. but there's more to come, right?
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot more to unpack.
So everyone stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into the world of tech and nuclear power.
Welcome back, everyone.
All right, so last time we left off talking about, get this, underwater loudspeakers at nuclear plants.
Yeah, that was a pretty wild detail, wasn't it?
Seriously, I never would have guessed.
It just shows you how complex these projects can get, all the little things they have to consider.
But okay, back to the big picture. We talked a lot about the tech side of things, data centers, SMRs, all that.
But now I think we need to ask, like, the bigger question.
Okay, what's that?
What happens if this whole tech-driven nuclear thing, this resurgence, what if it actually works?
What if they pull it off?
Exactly. What could that mean for the rest of us, for the world?
It's like they're the guinea pigs, right?
Kinda, yeah. Testing the waters, seeing if nuclear can really make a comeback.
And everyone's watching.
Big time. And the potential upside is huge. We're talking a massive reduction in carbon emissions.
Less reliance on fossil fuels, those dirty things.
And potentially a ton of new jobs in the nuclear industry, a whole new sector opening up.
So, a lot of good stuff. Almost sounds too good to be true.
Well, let's not get carried away. We can't forget about the risks.
Yeah, those are still there, right?
Waste disposal, accidents, proliferation of nuclear weapons, that's a big one. We need to be honest about those, address them head on.
So it's a balancing act, like always.
Always. Weigh the benefits against the risks, find a way forward that makes sense, that's safe.
But even if we solve the, technical stuff, the safety stuff, there's still the public perception problem.
Oh, that's huge. A lot of people are just straight up afraid of nuclear power.
And I don't blame them after everything that's happened.
I get it, but that's where I think the tech industry could actually make a difference.
How?
They're really good at, marketing, shaping opinions.
They've convinced us to do all sorts of crazy stuff, carry around these little supercomputers in our pocket.
Exactly. Share everything about our lives online. Maybe they can do the same for nuclear, make it seem less scary, more appealing.
Rebrand it, basically. Nuclear 2.0.
Yeah, something like that. Instead of being associated with disaster, it becomes associated with innovation, with a clean future.
Nuclear. It's not your grandpa's energy source anymore. Something like that.
Exactly.
I like it. But let's be real. It's going to be tough to overcome decades of, bad press.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those images of Chernobyl, Fukushima, those are burned into people's minds.
So what can we do as, regular people to make sure this whole nuclear thing goes in the right direction?
Well, first off, stay informed. Educate yourself.
Don't just believe everything you hear, right?
Exactly. Read articles, research different perspectives. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
And talk to people who have different opinions. Really try to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. The more informed we are, the better choices we can make.
And speaking of choices, let's zoom out for a second. Think about climate change.
Right. The big picture.
How does nuclear fit into all of that, this whole effort to create a sustainable energy future?
Well, it's a big piece of the puzzle, that's for sure. Low carbon, reliable baseload power. We talked about that before.
So it's like a foundation we can build on.
Exactly. Renewables are great, but they need that foundation, something to rely on when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
So it's like a team effort, renewables and nuclear working together.
Yeah, and we can add other stuff to the mix too. Energy storage, smart grids, the whole 9 yards.
The goal is to get off fossil fuels, right?
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Clean, sustainable energy for everyone.
That's pretty good to me.
It does, doesn't it?
Oh.
But getting there, it's not going to be easy. We need to work together, be innovative, and make some tough choices along the way.
No one ever said saving the world is going to be easy.
That's for sure. But it's definitely worth fighting for.
Well said. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Big tech's interest in nuclear, the benefits, the risks, the SMR thing, and the whole public perception issue.
And we've stressed the importance of, thinking critically, making informed decisions, finding that balance.
Exactly. It's not about blindly supporting or rejecting nuclear power.
It's about understanding it, understanding the trade-offs, the potential consequences.
And with that in mind, I think it's time for our final part.
Where we'll leave you with a question to ponder, something to really think about.
Okay, so we're back, and we've been talking about nuclear power and all its twists and turns.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
And now we've reached, the big question, the one we really want you to think about.
The one that goes beyond the tech stuff, beyond the risks and benefits, and gets to the heart of what all this means for us.
Exactly. So here it is. What if, and stay with me here, what if these tech giants, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles of the world,
The big players.
yeah, what if they go all in on nuclear power? Not just as a temporary fix, but as their main energy source, their long-term strategy?
What kind of message does that send?
Exactly. What does that tell the rest of us?
Well, it could mean a couple of things, right? On one hand, it might be a sign that nuclear is finally shedding that negative image it's had for so long.
But it's getting a makeover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who better to give it a makeover than the tech industry? They've made electric cars cool, smart homes, even space travel.
So why not nuclear?
Right. Suddenly nuclear isn't this scary, risky thing anymore. It's the sleek, innovative answer to climate change.
Nuclear, the future of energy. I can see the ad campaign now.
Exactly.
But seriously, if they can pull that off, if they can make nuclear desirable, it could have a huge ripple effect.
More investment, faster innovation,
Right.
maybe even lower costs as nuclear becomes more mainstream.
It's like a chain reaction, but in a good way.
Precisely.
But, and there's always a but, what if this whole nuclear push, even if it's done with the best intentions,
Yeah.
what if it distracts us from other important solutions, like, using energy more efficiently, reducing our consumption, investing in a wider range of renewables?
You're right. We can't put all our eggs in one basket, even if it seems like a really shiny basket.
Exactly. There's no silver bullet here. We need a multi-pronged approach, and nuclear can only be one part of that.
Agreed. We need to stay focused on all the options, all the ways to create a truly sustainable future.
And then there's a question of, well, who benefits most from this whole nuclear boom? Will it be everyone or just a select few?
That's a big one, right?
Mm.
Will we see those benefits? Cleaner energy, lower costs, technological advancements? Will those be shared fairly? Or will it just make the rich richer and the powerful even more powerful?
It's something we need to keep an eye on for sure.
Absolutely. We need to make sure this transition to a cleaner energy future is just that, a transition for everyone, not just a select few.
So, like we've been saying all along, it's complicated. There's no easy answer, no simple solution.
But that's what makes it so important to talk about, to have these conversations.
To ask questions, to challenge assumptions, to really think critically about what kind of future we want to create.
Exactly. And to hold those in power accountable, whether they're in government or in the tech industry.
Because ultimately, the choices we make about nuclear power, about energy in general, those choices will have a huge impact on the world we leave behind.
On our children and our grandchildren and generations to come.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. Take a moment to think about all the energy that powers your life. Your phone, your computer, the lights in your home, the way you get from place to place.
And ask yourself, could nuclear power be a part of a cleaner, more sustainable energy future for all of us?
It's a question worth pondering, a conversation worth having, and we hope this deep dive has given you the information and the inspiration to join that conversation, to make informed decisions, and to help shape the future of energy in a way that benefits everyone. Thanks for listening.